Hello, Bulgarians, and welcome back to Boldly Becoming. I'm your host, Kennyetta, and today's episode is tender but necessary. We're talking about grief, something every one of us have faced or will face at some point. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, a friendship, a dream, or even a season of life we thought would last forever. And while grief can feel like the end, with God's grace, it doesn't have to be the whole story. Today, we're exploring how grief can become a place where God meets us, heals us, and even grows us. Scripture reminds us in Psalm 34:18 that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Also, in John 11, when Jesus arrives after the death of Lazarus, he doesn't rush past the grief of Mary and Martha. He weeps with them. Now, think about it. The Son of God, who knew resurrection was coming, still took time to sit in their sorrow. That's the kind of God we serve, one who doesn't dismiss our pain, but enters into it with us. So to help us sit in this truth today, I want to introduce you to some people who may sound familiar because in some way, they are all of us. Elena, she's grieving the loss of her mother. Marcus, he's grieving the loss of his job and identity. Tasha and David, they're grieving the hope of children. And Jordan, he's grieving the dream that hasn't happened yet. Their stories will walk with us as we explore what it means to grieve with grace and grow through loss. Elena sits in her living room surrounded by boxes of her mother's belongings. Everyone tells her she's so strong, but what she really wants is permission to say, "This hurts, and I miss her." Grief begins when we give ourselves permission to name the loss. Like Elena, we don't have to rush to move on or hide behind strength. God honors our honesty. Healing starts when we say, "This mattered, this broke me, and I bring even this to God." Because here's the truth, family. When grief goes unnamed or unmasked, it doesn't disappear. It shows up in other ways. It weighs on our minds with anxiety and heaviness. It drains our bodies with fatigue, tension, and even sickness. It clothes our spirit with disconnection from God and from others. But when we name the grief, something shifts. Naming it is not weakness. It is alignment. It connects the spiritual with the mental and the physical. It allows God's Spirit to meet us in our honesty and begin the work of healing from the inside out. Marcus spent 15 years at the same company. Then one day, a layoff notice. He doesn't just miss the paycheck, he misses the purpose. Who is he without his work? In his grief, Marcus discovers God's presence in unexpected ways. A neighbor who checks in, a scripture that steadies his heart, a quiet sense that his worth isn't tied to a job title. God doesn't rush him into a new career. He sits with Marcus in the silence and reminds him, "You are more than what you produce. You are mine." But here's the honest truth. Sometimes in grief, it's hard to see God at all. The pain feels louder than his presence. The silence feels unbearable. And for some of you listening, maybe you don't know God personally. Maybe you're still wondering if he's even real. And that's okay. Grief is heavy whether you're walking with faith or still searching for it. Now, let's be real. Grief is also a spiritual battle. Like Elena or Marcus, when the pain is fresh, we want to put the blame somewhere. And often we point it at God. Why did you allow this? Why didn't you stop it? The anger is real, but here's the power. Bodarius, naming that anger out loud doesn't push God away. It actually invites him into the rawest parts of our hearts, saying, "God, I am mad at you right now." Is still a prayer, and he's big enough to handle it. Because even in our grief, a relationship is being formed. Sometimes it's a deeper relationship with God. Sometimes it's with people He has sent into our lives for the specific purpose of healing. So, how can we let God be present with us in grief? Here's a few simple, practical steps. Name the struggle out loud. Pray honestly. God, I don't feel you right now. This hurts. Lean into small practices. Read one verse, whisper one prayer, sit in silence for 2 minutes. God honors even the smallest steps toward Him. Notice the helpers. Sometimes His presence shows up through people. The friend who listens, the neighbor who checks in, the song that lifts your spirit for a moment. If you don't know God yet, start with openness. Simply say, God, if you are real, meet me here. He's not intimidated by your questions or your doubts. Grief may strip away what we thought defined us, but it can never strip away God's ability to meet us, even in our anger, our doubt, or our searching. Tasha and David have prayed for years for a child. Along the way, they faced heartbreak that words barely capture. They've endured miscarriages, each loss feeling like a funeral no one else saw. They've walked through the exhaustion of financial strain of IVF treatments, watching Tasha's body change from the medications and feeling their marriage stretch under the weight of hope and disappointment. This is a grief that often goes unspoken. People tell them to just keep trying or ask questions that cut like glass. When are you going to have kids? They grieve not only the children they never got to raise, but the silence around their pain. And yet grace shows up here too. Grace looks like Tasha and David choosing not to blame each other, but to hold hands through the storm. Grace looks like the friend who shows up with dinner and no questions. Grace looks like the quiet prayer at night. God, give us the strength for one more day. Grace doesn't erase grief. It breathes with us in it. It gives us permission to rest when our bodies and spirits are weary. It reminds us that we are not broken or abandoned. And even in the waiting, grace makes room for healing to begin. Jordan thought by 29, they'd be an established artist. Instead, they're stuck juggling side jobs, watching peers succeed, and wondering if they missed their chance. The grief of unmet dreams hit hard. In the aftermath, Jordan battled depression and isolation. He's been pulling away from community, and anger sometimes spilled into relationships, leaving behind burned bridges with friends or family who didn't know how to respond to the storm he was in. But slowly, Jordan began to rebuild. Growth didn't come overnight. It came through reaching out to friends and seeking forgiveness, admitting the hurt and the way grief had changed him. It came through therapy, where he could finally say out loud the doubt and fears that had weighed him down. It came through more transparent conversations, where instead of hiding behind pride, he opened himself to advice and guidance from peers in his field who already walked the road of waiting and setbacks. And through all of this, Jordan began to see that growth isn't just about success. It's about becoming whole. Their art, though less recognized, became deeper and more authentic. Their struggle gave them empathy for others chasing hard dreams. And they realized that sometimes grief is the soil where God grows resilience, wisdom, and compassion. And here's what we need to remember, family. Growth doesn't mean you're settling on top of the world. It doesn't mean the baby arrives tomorrow or the tears for your loved one stop overnight or that you wake up an instant millionaire. Growth is deeper than material outcomes. Growth is about alignment. It's about finding your breath again when grief has stolen the very essence of your living. It's about being able to exhale. Not because the grief vanished, but because God is teaching you how to carry it with grace. Family, I don't want you to just hear this message. Just like our last episode, I want you to live it. Let these questions guide you this week. What grief am I still carrying that I need to acknowledge? Where has God's presence shown up in my loss, even quietly? How might grace invite me to be gentler with myself or others? What growth might be forming in me through my grief? Grief is not a detour. It's a sacred classroom. Elena, Marcus, Tasha, and David, and Jordan remind us that grief wears many faces, but grace meets them all. With God, grief is not wasted. It becomes the soil for deeper love, resilience, and growth. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Boldly Becoming. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who may be walking through grief right now. Let them know they are not alone. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, Boldarians, keep becoming, keep trusting your inner voice, and keep showing up boldly.